So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot went with him. There he is again, into the Negev. So they're back in that southern desert region. Apparently the famine has subsided, so they were probably in Egypt for a couple of years, and they slowly made their way back to the Negev, which was a few hundred miles away. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. We know the livestock was from Pharaoh, and I assume the precious metals came from selling animal products. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. Maybe he's renewing his commitment to God. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock.
Hey mate, your sheep's on my side of the property line.
No, it isn't.
You got your head on straight, look at it.
Oh, it's just one hoof. I don't see the
I
problem.
think you're making it a problem, stick brain.
What's your filthy language, blockhead?
I ought to poke you in the eye right now.
I'd like to see you
Move
try.
your sheep onto your side of the pasture.
No one gets this
It's not that
upset over
difficult.
a
It's
single
literally
hoof.
your job
It's
to be a
not
sheep
even
herder.
a quarter of the animal.
Gentlemen, there seems to be a conflict of interest here. Yeah, tell your crazy old geezer uncle to keep his crew on his own side of the pasture. Perhaps you'd like to tell him yourself. What seems to be the problem? There are too many sheep and not enough land.
And he called me bad names.
Having a lot of stuff is generally problematic. God gave humanity abundant resources, but when we take much more than we need, it ends up causing conflict. So in Deuteronomy, when God is preparing Israel to enter the Promised Land, he tells them what kind of king they need to have if they want a king. And some of the requirements are: the king must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. So wealth can easily hinder obedience and shift our allegiances away from God, as well as create a puffed up sense of entitlement. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Ironic, they could dwell near the Canaanites and Perizzites, but their own flesh and blood became an intolerable source of conflict. Then Abram said to Lot,
Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left.
Gotta hand it to Abram. This is one of his finer moments. He's willing to compromise and let Lot choose what he wants. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Have you noticed that Genesis paints Egypt in a pretty good light? It's a little surprising considering what's coming in the sequel, but you don't get the sense that Egypt is like an evil, God-forsaken place. But anyway, Lot looks in the direction of Zoar. We'll see more about Zoar later, but the author clarifies this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So apparently the original readers of Genesis already knew that Sodom and Gomorrah had been destroyed, so they would have been surprised to hear this description of a beautiful, well-watered plain.
Well, considering that option A is a lush rolling paradise of greenery and option B is a rotting hellscape of desolate waste, I believe the choice is quite simple.
That's not fair. Don't we get any say in it?
My friend, the Lord will provide our needs. Lot has chosen his reward.
So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Lot chose for himself. That's the same language of Genesis 6, where the sons of God chose for themselves from the daughters of men. And we've seen that the phrase journeying east in this book signals a move away from the presence and blessing of God. So if there was any hope that maybe Lot would be the promised heir of Abram, it seems he's disqualified himself. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. That's some ominous foreshadowing. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. So now there's a land promise given to Abram and his seed. It'll be spelled out in more detail in chapter 15. I will make your offspring, seed, as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. Sometimes we think of faith as being an abstract spiritual thing, but God always finds ways of anchoring our trust in tangible physical reality. Most obviously, we have faith in the God-man Jesus, who took on flesh and dwelt among us as the image of the invisible God. But the same thing happened back in Genesis. God could have just given Abram a promise and left it at that. But he gives all these object lessons. Abram, I want you to look in every direction and really see this land. I want you to walk and feel the dust under your feet. Walk everywhere. Your legs might start hurting, but I want you to bodily experience and appreciate what I'm saying to you in real life, in real time. This is my gift to you. My mind is drawn to that passage in 1 Corinthians 3 where Paul is pleading with the church to stop arguing and competing with each other like the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. Paul says, all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or the present or the future, all of them belong to you, and you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God. That's abstract, right? That's a spiritual reality. But I encourage you to look around you. Get up and walk. Because if you're like me, there are things you're still waiting on God to do. But there are also gifts and blessings in every direction, whether you have a mansion or an overpass, whether you're married or single, whether you're healthy or sick. Take some time to notice what God has given you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Even though his life was a waiting period, what else could he do but praise the giver of all good gifts?